Welcome back, everyone. How was your discussion? Fruitful? Okay, juicy. All right, so we'll begin again by generating refuge to make sure, and bodhicitta to make sure we have a good motivation. And then we'll just sit quietly for a couple of minutes, and then I'll set another motivation, and then we'll go from there. So anytime we're cultivating refuge and bodhicitta, it's good if you can, if you are inclined to actually visualize the Buddha in the space in front. It can be a very simple visualization, or maybe just a sense of white light, some benevolent white light in front of you, if that's more comfortable. The most important thing is to really feel that you're in the presence of some loving, wise, compassionate energy. Actually, from a Buddhist point of view, there's never any time that we're not an object of the Buddha's compassion and love and care. So we can tune into that reality. That's one of the characteristics of an omniscient mind, is that mind is constantly aware of all phenomena, and we're part of all phenomena. So the Buddhas know that we're hanging out together this weekend, and they're there, but we forget. So then we take time to generate refuge and bodhicitta, and it helps to visualize, to remind us that the Buddhas are in the space. So take a moment to do that, and then we'll get started.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soham. 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 Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soham.
Just thinking how right now around the world there are over 8 billion human beings, and they're driving here and there, they're flying here and there, going here and there, seeking happiness here and there. And probably most of them are completely mesmerized by their attachments to the happiness of this one life alone, all the while accumulating more and more negative karma that will ripen as dukkha, as unsatisfactory experiences. So that can pique our compassion. And although we too are still quite involved with attachment to the pleasures of this one life, we can feel positive, we can feel hopeful, encouraged, that we have interest to identify how attachment arises in our mind, how it functions, how it works. And also interest to learn some antidotes for countering that attachment when it arises. And we also have many opportunities to purify the negative karma that we've created due to attachment in the past. And so even with a little understanding of karma and the impact of afflictions like attachment, we can begin to sense that there is a solution to life's suffering and problems. We don't know what will happen later today or tomorrow or the next day. So let's aspire that while we have human intelligence and conducive conditions, let's use the opportunities we have to clearly investigate our situation, our mind, how our mind works, and recognize how we're pushed around by afflictions and karma. And do as much as we can to free ourselves from that situation so that one day we can lead all beings to be free of suffering. We will have the tools, the necessary tools to do that. So let's aspire. It's a very large motivation. Let's aspire to be able to bring all beings to a lasting state of happiness, freedom from suffering that arises from the various afflictions and karma. So as we continue going through this session and the 2 sessions tomorrow, I encourage you to listen for 2 things and to watch out for 2 things and make a note of them. One is to listen for the disadvantages of having attachment, being pushed around by attachment. And also listen for any antidotes that you hear for how to work with attachment. We will look at antidotes in the last session tomorrow, but kind of sprinkled in here and there with the meditations and the discussions, things that you learn from each other in the different discussions. So pay attention to those, keep a running tab of those. That'll be helpful. And I just thought to follow up, and this morning someone said, I'm attached to the Dharma. And so I just thought to follow up with that. First of all, we have to understand, well, what do you mean by Dharma? Because that word can mean many different things. So we could be talking about the Dharma jewel, true paths and true cessations, the realizational Dharma that we develop in our minds, or that Buddhas, Arya beings, have developed in their minds. We could also be talking about the scriptural Dharma, the spoken word of the Buddha that's been collected, written down in texts, preserved in texts. We could be talking about our Dharma practice. I just don't know what, I forget who said it, someone on this side of the room. Jeffrey, no, it wasn't you. Okay, it was you, Mark. Okay. Do you want to clarify, or we can just say all the above? Let's get him a microphone. Here's one. Just pass it back. Thank you.
So really, I'm attached to not forgetting what I've learned, because I know that my mind, I will lose my memory, my faculties will go away. And the thought of losing those little small bits of wisdom that I have realized is really troubling.
Uh-huh. Okay. What would we narrow that down to? Are you attached to control, maybe? Clarity of mind. Yeah, that's a reasonable thing to. Actually, I wonder if that's more like an aspiration rather than an attachment. And this will come up. I just want to talk briefly about some of the derivatives of attachment. And there is, there are positive types of desire. We can use the word desire in a positive or a not so positive way. And we do desire to cultivate good qualities and progress along the path, develop bodhicitta, those sorts of things. But that's a positive type of aspiration. I think it's more closely aligned with that word than real attachment, because attachment necessarily has an exaggeration, something that's above and beyond what's there. And I don't think you can exaggerate the actual Dharma. It will bring more than we can even imagine it will bring when we actualize true paths and true cessations, when we actualize wisdom, realizing emptiness in our own mind stream, and start to abandon the causes, the afflictions, the afflictive obscurations, the cognitive obscurations that bring so much suffering. So that's a good distinction to make. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, you want to add something?
I heard Mark say too is that he's troubled about the possibility of losing the faculty that will allow him to maintain that. So that is a troubled mind. So to make that distinction, as you said, from the aspiration, but the thing that you're clinging to that's troubling is losing your mind or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, and this is part and parcel of having a body and a mind controlled by karma and afflictions. We are all subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, getting what we don't want. This is what we want to overcome. And there's so much that we cannot control. But if that's your strong aspiration, then there are many things that can help you fulfill that aspiration. I think there's a reason why the monks and nuns in the monasteries, like the big monasteries in India, do a lot of memorizing. You don't hear too much about monks developing dementia. After all that memorizing, developing their mental faculties to such incredible degrees. So as much as you can, memorize what you can now. And, I think all of us over 50, 60, 70, we appreciate that those faculties are declining, and we need to, it does increase our enthusiasm for really paying attention. And the reality is that none of us, like we saw this morning, none of us know what's going to happen in any moment. We've mentioned this before. A few weeks ago, someone came to the Katina ritual ceremony that we had, and she had a stroke, a stroke that led to her death. We were talking with her, we were expecting to have lunch with her, and it didn't happen. So we don't know. This is part of the fundamental ambiguity of being a human, is that we just don't know what's going to happen. We're not in control like we would like to be, like we think we are. We're in control of some gross things in our lives. We can choose to come to a weekend like this. We can choose to do a practice on a daily basis, but there's so much that we have absolutely no control over, because our karma, our past accumulated actions, are really what is in control. But what we can control is what our mind is focusing on now, and that will influence the kind of karma that ripens, the kind of experiences that ripen. so that we can develop more and more trust in and put more energy into. Anybody want to add anything to that? Yes, please.
Over the years, listening to Jeffrey Hopkins teach us and all the troubles he's had with his health, including losing all of his ability to speak Tibetan and having to regain it, he's really convinced me that there's a part of the mind that is still holding on to these things that we can't access. When the body part isn't making it available, but some of these things he's been able to regain quite, he said, I just have to open the doors again. So my thought about this really is that there are things that we're planting that will go on to the next life, and it will be like Venerable Jigme always said to me, she said, you have a karma with this, you have some familiarity with this, this comes easily. So it's like some things I think that we work on in this life will come to us more easily than they would have otherwise in a future life. So I don't feel like it's like I don't feel like death makes us lose everything, because our mind stream goes on, and we have done something that's going to, I think, go forward. Or else why would these various realized beings or others be able to remember things so easily? Like some of them, like they remember stuff when they're children, like that. Or we've heard of people that they hear something once and they've got it memorized because they've memorized it in previous lives. I think that's a comfort to me.
Yeah. I think that comes down to the strength of the imprints we put on our mind streams through familiarity. Did you want to add something, Jim? I don't think it's on. Press the button till it's green.
I'm learning. I think about like there's understanding and then there's realization. And one of my teachers, Ram Dass, I knew him close to when he died, and it seemed like as he got older, he had less ability to communicate, but his realization seemed to blossom, and so there was a lot more kind of coming through him than he could express or explain.
Yeah. I think the same was true of Thich Nhat Hanh
Right.
in his last years.
And one last thing, when I read the Dharma text, like in the Nundra, it always says, like, what are you going to take? It's only the Dharma that comes with you. So
Right.
there it doesn't say like it's depending upon your ability to remember things or to have your cognitive faculties intact. It seems like there's some kind of storehouse in the Alaya that is being, or there's something we're building that's beyond, what we can access all the time.
Yes, and I think it is a very real fear for some people to still be in this life, in this world, and not have access to their faculties. We probably equate a lot of that with our personality, who we are, our sense of self. So especially people who have dementia in their genetic makeup, their family line, that can, or even if we don't, like a stroke could happen and take some of our abilities. So, when we think about these things, they can, rather than having them become fearful for us or debilitating, they can be inspirational to us to really make use of our life, like we find in the death. We do meditations on death. And like you're saying, the only thing we take with us, we can't take our family, our friends, our possessions, but we take the Dharma. We take what we have cultivated on our mind stream. We also take our afflictions, our karmic seeds, but we take the Dharma with us. And so when we recognize that, then we put more emphasis on that. We make that a priority in our life. And so, doing weekends like this can help to reinvigorate us. We need community to help us stay enthused in our practice, because it's hard to do on your own, isn't it? Yeah, please.
Two things from online.
someone saying it's very important to habituate to compassion, and they're quoting Jeffrey Hopkins saying that, when he couldn't access the Dharma when he had Lyme's disease and so forth. He said, at least I can still be kind. At least I can refrain from being a jerk. He had that even if he couldn't remember the other stuff through his dedicated practice of compassion.
Right.
And then someone is asking, in relation to being attached to the Dharma, is it possible to be attached to the Dharma if one engages in practice for entertainment instead of with the correct motivation?
Of course. There's attachment involved. Yeah, so that's not really attached to the Dharma per se. That's attached to our crazy thinking, or attached to somehow we're thinking by engaging with it in an inappropriate way that we're going to get something back from it. So, whatever we're doing before we meet the Dharma, we'll probably bring that to the Dharma until we figure out that doesn't work. Yeah. Okay. So, rich conversations. So let's just look at some of these different variations on attachment. So desire can be positive. We can desire to develop positive states of mind, positive realizations, things like that. So we need to check when we see the word desire, we need to check to see what context it's being used in. Also, the word greed can sometimes be used in place of attachment, but I don't know, greed has a different flavor to it. It has more of a flavor that wants more than our fair share, and maybe at the expense of others. Greedy, being selfish, it has a selfish tinge to it. But sometimes you will see that, whatever the Tibetan word is, or the Pali word, you'll see it translated as greed. Also, lust sometimes is used for attachment. Jeffrey Hopkins likes that translation, or at least in some of his books. And although lust actually can mean an intense longing or enthusiasm for something, there is a strong connotation of sexual attachment, isn't there? At least in my mind. Craving is another word that we often see. We crave for sense pleasures here in the desire realm. And craving is a type of attachment for pleasant feelings, or craving to separate from unpleasant feelings. It's often used that way. So there are forms of craving that are non-virtuous, but there are also forms of craving that are virtuous. Like we can crave the pleasant feelings of samadhi in the higher realms, for instance. And so we might make a lot of effort to develop concentration to be reborn in the higher realms, things like that. Also, we find that word craving as the eighth link. It's a form of craving that arises when we die. It's a very specific use of that word. The craving of not wanting to separate from our body. Yeah, this body. But then right on the heels of that comes grasping. And so we are separating, and so then we're now grasping at new aggregates. Grasping is like an increase of craving. So we find those two words in the 12 links. And then miserliness is also a type of close-fisted attachment, but miserliness also has flavors of other afflictions, like selfishness or envy, jealousy, mean-spiritedness even, not wanting to share. It's mentioned as one of the causes of being reborn as a hungry ghost. So that's an interesting thing to watch out for. And we can be miserly with all sorts of things, can't we? It's selfish. We don't want to share, whether it's something material, or we don't want to share our virtues or the support that we get. We don't want to share the Dharma with people. Sometimes there are people who just want Dharma for themselves. That's distorted. But sometimes that happens due to miserliness. Haughtiness is a type of attachment. It's an attachment to our good qualities, like our youth or our beauty or our athletic abilities, and exaggerating the pleasure of those, being attached to our health or our power, our prosperity, and things like that. And the danger of haughtiness, it almost sounds like pride, but maybe it's tinged with pride. But the danger of haughtiness is that it leads to complacency, because, hey, we're doing pretty good. And so I can just rest on my laurels. I've already done quite a bit. And so then we get lazy. That's a real danger. Restlessness, that's Venerable's translation for a word that we find in other contexts translated as excitement. And this comes up in the context of generating calm abiding or serenity, meditative stability. What are other words for, anyway, calm abiding? Huh? Tranquility, yeah. And this is it's a mental factor that disturbs or distracts the mind to a desirable object other than the one we're supposed to be meditating on. So the mind just gets a little bit excited. We might be going to a virtuous object, but the mind is distracted from the object it's supposed to be on. So that's something to be overcome in our development of serenity or calm abiding. And covetousness also comes up as a type of attachment, but covetousness is usually spoken about in the Buddhist context in terms of one of the 10 non-virtues that we're trying to refrain from to create the causes, ethical causes for a good rebirth. So covetousness is a coarse kind of attachment that wishes to make others' wealth or property our own. And we're spending a lot of time thinking about, how can I get this? That's the action. So similar to miserliness, it's also influenced by envy and a lack of integrity and longing. There's this longing, I wish I had that, I wish it was mine, I'm gonna make it mine. So it's a mental action that we're doing again and again. And eventually it does, well, it can very easily lead to then physical actions or verbal actions. There are probably many other derivatives, but those are the ones that easily came to mind. And I'd like to say, remind us to keep in mind that to like or enjoy something doesn't always mean that we're attached to it. We can enjoy something. Venerable Kuncho, would you tell us about that clip that you saw of His Holiness in the Mission Joy video? I didn't see it, but he was telling me about His Holiness making a very clear statement about this.
Yeah, it was in Mission Joy, the guy that was performing the interview. I was making the interview with His Holiness and Desmond Tutu. At one point, he was asking this question to His Holiness, like, it seems that you were enjoying the food very much at lunch, like the dessert and all of that. And His Holiness was just like, yeah, of course. I need food to survive. I wish I could survive just on light and bliss, but I need food to feed this body. And there's nothing wrong about enjoying food. Attachment is the problem. But yeah, it was so, I don't know, simple in his answer, but yeah.
So clear.
Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the scene that much, but yeah, it struck me.
Yeah, so the challenge for us is to ferret out, to tease out, because often our motivations are mixed. We might enjoy something and just simply being enjoying it, but very quickly attachment can sneak in. So this is our work. Did you want to add something?
Could you maybe use the example of the morning tea to describe the difference? You just before in the morning had mentioned that you get up and we make our first cup of tea.
We're coming to that.
Okay.
Yeah, hang on to that. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to make a point about that in just a moment. So again, if we think about it, our usual definition of attachment, our working definition, we could say, is meeting an object of attachment. That's happiness, isn't it? That's our definition of happiness, not attachment, happiness. And we just, we're in the process of learning to recognize that our mind has added something. It's adding some exaggeration on top of the object itself. And that those two, the object and then the projection are mixed in our mind, because again, attachment is accompanying a mental consciousness, how we're thinking about the object. So that's important to understand. And so I was thinking about, well, what examples do I have about this? And what came to my mind is that I would imagine that most of you are on some form of social media, right? Something, not you, Sarah, okay. Probably most of the people in the room are on some form of social media. And Although no one mentioned that, I'm attached to social media. Isn't that interesting? Someone said they were attached to their phone, but there's lots of things on the phone. Have you noticed when you're scrolling through social media that there's this flavor, there's this sense like, oh, just one more page, just one more article. It happens with news too, I've noticed. Just one more, let me just look a little farther down on the New York Times page. I'm sure there's something interesting that will give me a little buzz. Yeah, okay, so it has this anticipatory quality about it. Just a little bit more, I'm sure it will satisfy me. And it never does. So, true confessions here. When I lived in Australia, let's just say the monastic rules were a little bit more lax than they are here. And so I was on Facebook for a period of time, and I noticed that, I started with maybe 10 minutes just looking. This was in the old days of Facebook, when it first came out. Just 10 minutes, and then it'd turn into 15 minutes, and then, next week it'd be 20 minutes. And pretty soon it was like, oh my gosh, I just spent an hour on it. I can't believe that. And then one day I caught myself doing this, and I thought, wow, if I had spent all those moments cultivating compassion, I would be in a very different place than I am right now. And for me, that was enough of a slap in the face. Thank you, Buddhas. Maybe it was a blessing to just say, okay, I'm done with that. I'm not going to waste my life doing Facebook. Sorry, Jeff. So I'm just bringing that up I think it's a very tangible example of that longing, that anticipation, it's just around the corner. That's attachment. And so I encourage you, especially those of you who are online a lot, really pay attention to that. And, again, there are so many aspects of the Dharma that help us to analyze how we want to spend this precious human rebirth that we have right now. It's limited. It's like a sandglass? Hourglass. It's like an hourglass. Time is running out for all of us. I mean, sure, we'll get another rebirth, but we may not have the conditions that we have right now. We have really conducive conditions for studying the Dharma. So when we really reflect on that seriously, then we want to put more energy into things that are going to bring real value, real meaning and purpose to our lives. And really taking time to analyze, well, what are the things in my life that just waste my precious human rebirth? What can I let go of? How am I going to use my time? It's our greatest resource, our time, our energy. As we get older, we have less of that too. Our money, our resources, all of those things. How are we going to use them? So that's very important investigation and decision making for ourselves. No one can do that for us. Okay. And sadly, most people don't have any experience of the deep, stable happiness that can come only without attachment. That's the promise, that when it's like the scales. The more we can lessen our attachment and increase our detachment or non-attachment, the freer we will be, the happier we will be, the more spacious our mind can be. So I like this description from Sharon Salzberg's book, Loving Kindness. She says, and I think this analogy can apply to working with attachment too, although she's talking about meditation. At first, it's if we're sitting on the shore watching waves dancing on the surface of the ocean. Later, it's as if we're underwater in the calm, still depths, watching the waves above us moving and playing. Still later, we perceive that, in fact, we are the water, not apart or separate, and that waving is happening. So our mind we can constantly refine our mind to move toward greater clarity, greater reality, actually, conventional and ultimate reality, so that no matter what's going on around us, we're content, we're happy, we're peaceful. We have a peaceful mind. Less and less will disturb us the more we cultivate our good qualities. Okay, so now let's shift gears, and I would like to, actually I'm going to repeat something that I brought up in the Transforming Problems class, because I just think it's such a good example. So those of you who have heard this before, you can check to see how your progress is going, okay? So if you put up slide number 6, it's not so important, but we can say in a nutshell that any experience of happiness in the sense of pleasure and ease arise from previously accumulated virtuous actions, physical, verbal, and mental actions. Any experience of happiness. That's a big statement, isn't it? Any experience of pleasure or ease arises from previously accumulated karma. So this is drawing on the fact that when we have virtuous states of mind and we create virtuous actions, positive actions, we place a potential on our mind stream. We're creating imprints on our mind stream, or we call them seeds. And those imprints, those potentials will sit there until the conditions, all the conducive conditions come together, and then they will ripen in terms of different experiences that come our way. And the opposite is also true, that any experience of dissatisfaction and suffering, in the sense of painful or unsatisfactory feelings, arise from previously accumulated non-virtuous karma. Again, physically, verbally, mentally. So that's pretty powerful to think about, isn't it? That it really puts the onus on what we're doing with our mind. So this is why we place a lot of emphasis on our motivation for the actions that we do. You might notice here at the Abbey, we start every session with a motivation, and we also end each session with a dedication. So by doing that, we're steering any virtue, any merit that we're creating, so that we get the results that we're aiming for. We're not just leaving it up to chance. So in Transforming Problems, Zopa Rinpoche said, with few exceptions, all actions we perform, with few exceptions, all actions that we perform with our body, speech, and mind out of attachment for our own happiness in this one life alone are non-virtuous and thus result in suffering. Wow, that's potent. Now we need to investigate that. We're not just going to swallow that whole because a highly realized being said it. Although, if you know him, you might you would examine it seriously. But it's a potent statement, isn't it? So, yeah, do you find that sobering? Yeah, it's a good kind of sobering. So we may naively think that as long as we're not killing, we're not stealing, we're not engaging in unwise and unkind sexual behavior, that we're off the karmic hook, right? We're doing okay. And yes, it's true. If we refrain from the 10 non-virtues, we are creating causes for good rebirths, no doubt about it. However, any action motivated by attachment, there's two qualities here, motivated by attachment just for the happiness of this one life alone is considered non-virtuous. This is why motivation is so important. So in our Buddhist practice, our motivations, we're aiming for at least a good rebirth. We're thinking about future lives. It's important to be thinking about. And you know, if we don't have conviction yet about the fact that, you know, our mind is a continuity and it's being propelled from life to life, no problem. But I would suggest keeping just a little bit of doubt there and continue investigating. And we can do that many different ways. There are a lot of books about people who remember their past lives. Also, there are lots of books about holy beings that remember past lives. There have even been very serious scientific studies, people who have investigated a lot of stories of children who remember their past lives in particular. But also we can think about the nature of our own mind, how our mind is constantly changing. And for example, what we're doing with our mind right now will influence the kind of mind we have tonight and the kind of mind we have tomorrow. So we can see that we can see that continuity, at least in short bursts. You know, and if we take that all the way out to the end of our life, well, what happens to that last moment of mind? Where's it going to go? Is it just going to poof, finish? Or does that last moment of mind give rise to the next moment of mind somewhere else? These are things to investigate. There are other lines of logic and reasoning we can use, but that's not the main focus right here. Okay, so we're aiming for at least a good future rebirth. We're thinking about future lives. We need to be thinking about future lives. And we're also thinking about either personal liberation or full awakening as one of our long-term goals. And those are big goals, that's nothing that's going to happen next week for most of us. But at least by planting the seeds in our mind stream that this is what I'm aiming for, as a byproduct, we will be happier now, in the present. And also we're creating the conditions so that whatever virtue we're creating is not exhausted until we achieve that result. So that's double coupon day, that's good value for your merit. You remember double coupon day. I do too. We used to save green stamps. We had little booklets of green stamps. Okay, dating myself. So again, I'm going to repeat this little exercise because I need to remind myself of this regularly. And so I'm just assuming that you're in the same boat, okay? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But if you think about an average day, what is your first thought when you wake up? Tea. Okay. Me? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. How's my day gonna be? Yeah. Yeah. How many of you hit the snooze alarm? You do, I know, because you're attached to sleep. You hit the snooze alarm. Yeah, a few people. You do. Oh, okay. You don't even set a, well, there you go. You're retired and that's the benefit of retirement. Yeah. Actually, here at the Abbey, Venerable has really encouraged us and encouraged everyone to try to wake up with 3 motivations as soon as we're conscious. Today, as much as possible, may I not harm anyone with my body, speech, and mind. Today, as much as possible, may I benefit others with my body, speech, and mind. And may I do all the activities that I'm engaged with today with an altruistic motivation. You've heard this in the meditation hall this morning. So if we're prone to hit the snooze alarm instead, or the snooze button, what's the motivation for that? Is it virtuous? Is it about future lives? No. Okay. Well, what's the motivation for a cup of tea? Is that a virtuous motive? You have a virtuous motivation for heading to the kitchen? Nope.
Ideas on it, like
I need it. I have to have it. I can't wake up until I have that cup of tea. Yeah. All right. So what's the first thing you do when you get out of bed? Go to the bathroom. What's your motivation for that? Comfort. Let's just say comfort. So again, as Buddhists, we are encouraged to start our day with 3 prostrations. And so I hope some of us stumble out of bed and at least do 1 or 2 prostrations. But again, what's the motivation for that on an average day? Is there really some awareness about why we're doing that and what we hope to be the outcome of that? It's good to check. And yeah, you notice we have mantras in our bathroom. We even use going to the bathroom as part of our Dharma practice. This is, again, trying to make good value of all our time here. And then making that cup of tea. I know for me, I even after all these years, I still want it just to taste right. I want it to be just sweet enough and just the right amount of oat milk. I like oat milk now. Makes it creamy, better than almond milk. So, we all have these habitual attachments. Look, we haven't been out of bed for more than 10 minutes, and look how attachment is pushing us around. How many decisions in the first 10 minutes of our day are motivated by attachment to me, my pleasure, what's going to bring me happiness? That should be a little bit sobering, because if that's in the first 10 minutes, guess what's happening the rest of the day when we're really preoccupied with many other things, many other activities. So that's why I like this exercise. It just reminds me, right, there's a lot of momentum behind our habit of attachment. Again, that doesn't make us bad people, it just means we're deeply habituated, and our mind is impermanent. We can start to notice those motivations and start to change them. So all day long, we pretty much unconsciously make decisions based on the mantra, what's going to bring me the most happiness right now? That's really in the back of the mind. If you honestly check the actions that you're doing, So I encourage you to do that. And if you find that there is some attachment going on, then see if you can shift, apply an antidote, or think about others. May I do this for others? There are many ways we can turn our minds. So that's the benefit. Okay. Also, just noticing any non-virtuous state of mind throughout the day, whether it's attachment or anger or jealousy, whatever, to remember, this is not going to turn out well. This is not the cause of happiness. Let me turn my mind immediately. That is so empowering when you discover that for yourself and can take that on. So we train ourselves to, here at the Abbey, we train ourselves to be involved with motivating all of our activities, morning practice, evening practice. Before we do offering service, we have a particular motivation. When we go into the kitchen to cook, we have a particular motivation. So you can create motivations for everything that you're doing. Even mundane tasks can become part of your Dharma practice just by having a genuine virtuous motivation for doing it. By vacuuming this floor, may I purify my mind as easily as I vacuum this floor so that I can quickly attain full awakening for the benefit of all beings. Be creative. Doesn't have to be textbook perfect. Just be creative and see what you come up with. Okay, so there's also some good news. The next slide has some good news on it, and that's that all actions of body, speech, and mind done with a virtuous state of mind that seeks happiness beyond this life, seeks the happiness of future lives, or seeks happiness of all beings are virtuous. So our motivation really controls everything. And then once we've generated some virtue, we want to protect it. We want to put it in the karmic bank. So that's what we're doing with our dedication. Again, we're steering it in a particular way and protecting it. The classic description of the power of motivation is found in Pabanka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. So again, we went through this a couple of weeks ago, but those of you who heard this, check up to see, has this influenced my mind, or did I just kind of smile and laugh and say, yep, that's right, and then forget about it? Suppose 4 people are reciting the 21 praises to Tara like we do every morning before breakfast. One reciter has a bodhicitta motivation. They're really doing it for the benefit of all beings, wishing to attain enlightenment. Another person has a motivation for personal liberation. They just want to get out of samsara and be free themselves. A third person is doing it for a good rebirth. And the fourth person is just doing attached to the pleasures of this life, maybe thinking about wanting to recite these praises to create wealth or prosperity or good health, something like that, dedicating it for those things. And as I said, we'd have to add at least a 5th person who has no motivation at all, because there are days where we're just spaced out, aren't we? With the motivation or with our prayers or with our dedications. Sometimes I find my mouth moving. I'm thinking, how's my mouth moving? I'm not really paying attention. So when we find that, Venerable Jigme mentioned this a couple weeks ago, when we find that we're mindlessly doing something, start fresh and bring your full attention to it so that we get the benefit of it. That's the point. So different motivations bring different karmic results. That's the upshot of all this. Because the first person was reciting with a bodhicitta motivation, they are creating, that acts as a cause for enlightenment. That will carry with them all the way to enlightenment. And the second person's recitation will act as a cause for their personal liberation. It is not exhausted until they achieve that goal. And the third person's recitation will be a cause for fortunate rebirth. It doesn't contribute to their liberation or their enlightenment, but it is going to contribute to a rebirth. And the fourth person's recitation, seeking happiness in this life, it might bring a little bit of happiness in this life, but then it's finished. It doesn't contribute to anything in the future. What a waste, what a waste. And I don't know about the 5th person, if we're reciting without any motivation at all, maybe because of the power of the holy object of reciting those praises, maybe we get a little bit of something somewhere along the line, I don't know. But these are topics I think we need to come back to again and again, because it's important. It's important to refresh them, because we forget, we aren't mindful, we get lazy, we get busy, many different things take our attention, so we come back to this. And all of this is really coming down to the point that our mind is the creator of our happiness and suffering. Happiness and suffering depend on our mind, what we're doing with our mind. So that's really so important in the Buddhist tradition. Okay, now let's shift gears again, and this time let's investigate any attachment that we have to our body. Just going for the jugular here, just jumping right in. Why? Because we always have our body with us, and it's important to recognize how much of the time we spend taking care of our body is really involved with attachment, so that we can make some conscious decisions about what we want to do differently. So, do you think about your body accurately? Most of you? Probably not. I think it's fair to say we're all attached to our body. Anybody not attached? That's pretty fair to say. And we probably exaggerate along those lines. We exaggerate the happiness that we think we can get from this body. If we think back to the time when we had COVID, that would be a good indicator. How was your mind during that time? Assuming most of us had COVID. You haven't had COVID, have you? Good for you. Good karma. But the rest of us, Yeah, good precaution too. Did you notice any exaggerated thoughts or worry arising about your body when you had COVID and about your health? I could almost feel the virus invading me. I'm sure I could. I remember exactly when it happened. I woke up at 3 a.m. and it was just like something's taking over me. Or thoughts like, oh, this feels pretty bad. How long is this going to last? Did you have that thought? Some of you may have had a pretty light case, but others probably had different experiences. Maybe you had thoughts like, how long is this fatigue going to last? Or how long is this cough going to last? How long is this snot going to last? Blowing the nose. What if I never get my sense of smell back? Any of you had that situation? Or maybe I have long COVID. How many of you thought, yep, I probably have long COVID? Yeah. So, and probably you didn't. So excessive thoughts, right? You thought it on day 5. I'm sure I have long COVID. It's been 5 days. Yeah, so, we may say, nah, I'm not attached to my body, but then we get COVID, or we get a cold, or we sprain our ankle or something, and then we get to see how obsessive the mind can be about this body. So keep in mind, we're just exploring here. I'm just going to put out some questions for you to consider. There's no shaming going on here, okay? We're just having some fun. Okay. So cleaning our bodies. How many of you are attached to having a clean body? Probably most of us, yeah. Think how much time we spend cleaning our body. It's a lot, isn't it? Takes more maintenance the older you get. First thing in the morning, probably, many of you take a shower, wash your face, shave your face, whatever you need to do. Then there's brushing and flossing and those sorts of things. And then, there's taking care of our nails and exfoliating our skin. And probably some of you have a skincare routine, the whole thing. Don't get me wrong, it's good to have a clean body. We want to have a clean body, but what's our usual motivation? This is the $60 million question for the weekend. What is our motivation for doing those things? Attraction. Is that why you clean your body? You want to be attractive? I'm sorry? I'm just checking. For most people, you're probably right. I'm just... Good for you, Sarah. All right. Yep. Okay. What's the longest you've gone between showers? 2 weeks? 2 weeks? Months? Well, you were hiking, right? Okay. You had an excuse. Yeah, but for the rest of us, on an average time, what's the longest we can tolerate going without a shower? Not very long, right? Couple years? No. I'm sorry, I didn't. I said a couple days. A couple days, I'm sorry. Hearing's going. Yeah. And probably those of you who are new to the Abbey, I mean, you're only here probably for 2 nights, but you know, when we ask you to conserve water and take a shower every second or third day, probably some of you cringe, huh? It's a new experience, you know? So it's helpful to really investigate when we're doing those activities. Am I exaggerating the happiness that can come from cleaning my body? Am I exaggerating the satisfaction that having a clean body can bring me? Does cleanliness add to our status or our self-esteem? I find that to be a really interesting question. You know, why do we do some of the things we do regarding our body? Do we think it adds something to our sense of self-esteem? It was interesting, we had a guest staying with us for a couple of weeks, and during that time, Venerable Chodron was giving a talk at North Idaho College, and so we all got in the cars and went to NIC, and she went along with us. And then later, she was telling me about how surprised she was when she got there, that she realized she hadn't taken a shower, she hadn't washed her hair, you know, she'd been working in the forest, she hadn't put on any lipstick or anything, and she found that she was okay. It was a new experience for her. Yeah, so those things can happen at the Abbey. So when you look in a mirror, what's the first thing you scrutinize? The wrinkles, yes. Mm-hmm. The way the skin is changing. She's wondering what the hell happened. Hand her a microphone, please. Let's record this for posterity. Okay, so how many of you look at your hair? A few, not that many. Okay, so let's just go from the head down, shall we? All right, so think about how much time you spend taking care of your hair. Monastics, we have an advantage, don't we? It was such a relief to shave off that hair and not have to fuss with it, but the rest of you still have hair to deal with, right? So how much time do you think you spend taking care of your hair? Brushing it, combing it, coloring it, tinting it, curling it, fussing with it. I had one hairstylist, he became a friend after a while, and he confessed to me one day, he said, you know, I'm really fed up with women coming to me and expecting me to change their whole life just by doing their hair. You know, we have a lot of expectations. Just a new coloring or new hairstyle, we think it's...
My hairstylist has in front, says, I'm a beautician, not a magician.
So his hairstylist has a sign that says, I am a beautician, not a magician. That's good. Yeah. Okay, one bad hair day can really spoil a lot of things, can it? Yeah, that's a sign. Do you feel obliged to apologize to others if your hair is messed up and not, you have gym hair or something? Do you feel obliged to explain what's going on? Again, just check to see what's motivating that. Have you ever explored, why do I care so much what other people think about my hair? Why do we care so much? Yeah, it's interesting. This is something, I'll just put this in here, because this is something that I have found to be so beneficial of what we do at the Abbey, and that is, Venerable emphasizes so much that we need to learn how to evaluate ourselves, not relying so much on what others think of us. And that practice alone is so liberating, really. And how we're evaluating ourselves is not based on these superficial things like looks, but rather it's based on, what is my heart? How are my actions? What are my thoughts like? How am I speaking to others? How is my compassion developing? And as we do that, we naturally feel better about ourselves as a byproduct. It just happens naturally. You don't have to work at it. Our self-esteem goes up, and we're the ones who are evaluating. So that, because in one day, one person can tell you, you're great, you're the best thing, that's ever been, and then someone else a half hour later tells you the opposite of that. Who do you believe? If we're really evaluating ourselves based on others, we'll be going up and down like a yo-yo. That's one of the disadvantages of attachment. Write that down. It's a disadvantage that our mind is just like up and down, depending on what's happening around us, rather than finding the stability within ourselves, within our own mind. So that's a great value. Yes, please.
One of our friends that we've known for years confided to me years ago that she felt that she had to dye her hair to stay competitive. She was in that situation where she would see that other people were being released as their hair naturally went gray.
From work you're talking about?
For
A
work
situation?
yes. And there's also a very prominent newscaster in the last 2 years who was released when, she let her hair go gray.
Wow.
She was out of a job.
Interesting. Yeah. Ageism. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so what are the disadvantages of having so much attachment to our hair? It takes a lot of time. Yep. Time we could be using creating virtue, doing something meaningful. It's expensive, you bet. Yeah. Huh? It doesn't get better. It doesn't change your hair. There's a small window of when our hair is just right. That's right, yeah. I had really straight hair. It was awful. And so I'd spray it, and spray it down so it wouldn't move all day. The tricks you do when you're attached to your hair and your looks. Okay, so we probably have unrealistic expectations of ourselves to be perfect, to look good all the time. That's why we explain when we don't look so good. Really, I look good all the time, just not this moment. Because, let me tell you why. And we, our moods go up and down. We can feel depressed when we feel judged or we don't meet our own expectations. Those are just a few that came to my mind, but I'm sure there are many more. So that's something. Dharma really is about asking questions. I heard one teacher say, if you're not asking questions, you're not doing the Dharma. So we need to investigate, learn that habit of investigating. This is what makes someone like Venerable Chodron such a powerful practitioner and teacher, is that she has really investigated her own experience and continues to do so and models it for us. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about skin. How many of you look in the mirror and look at your skin? Yep, okay, there's a few more of those. All right, so you're checking to see how that pimple's going, or how that cold sore is progressing, or how the blackheads are doing, or whatever the case may be, or how the dark circles and the bags and the wrinkles, yep, depending on our age. I'm of the generation that slathered herself with baby oil and laid it in the sun, so I've got a fair amount of those little age spots. You too? Yep, you and the green stamps, yep, we're in the same age bracket. And when I was home visiting my sister last fall, she very kindly slipped me a small jar of spot remover. I'm so grateful. Yeah.
One time I was listening to a talk from Ram Dass actually on aging and dying, and he was referencing a spot remover cream. He said the advertisement went, "You call them aging spots, I call them ugly." And he was like, "Well, we should maybe be reversing how we think about this. Like, you call them ugly, I call them aging spots." I don't know. Just I think about that sometimes.
Yeah, how we label things really makes a difference in how we see it. how we think about this body in general.
I used to go to the doctor and I would say, why is this going on? And they'd have a reason, an explanation. And now every time I go and complain, they say, oh, it's just aging. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yep. Oh, samsara. Okay. What's so interesting to observe now is that, it used to be you go to the dermatologist to get checked for cancer, but now you go to the dermatologist for all sorts of things, to get your Botox and your filler and, I don't know, some kind of peels and all sorts of, body sculpting. I don't know. I haven't really looked into it, but it seems like I went to get my skin checked, a couple of spots, and there were a lot of things on the list, the menu of what you could choose from. And cosmetic surgery has become very commonplace. How many of you know someone who has had cosmetic surgery before the age of 40? Yeah, fair number of people. Yeah, that's new. Well, maybe not for movie stars, but for the average person, usually you'd wait till you're a little older. So anyway, the upshot of this is how much attachment is involved in our choices with skincare, taking care of our skin. Again, there's nothing wrong with taking care of our skin. It's just, what's the motivation? We want to keep this body healthy and functioning so that we can do things that bring meaning and purpose to our life. And then we want to really check up, what are the disadvantages if I'm overemphasizing something about my skin or my looks? Now, this is not a big makeup crowd. Especially the front rows, but even in the back rows, this is not a big makeup crowd. But my mom used to say, I have to put my face on first before I can go anywhere. Do you remember that? Did your mother say that too? In other words, she wanted to be made up before she went out. And, again, fair enough. If that's how you feel comfortable going out into public, that's okay. I mean, more and more women, in particular, women are going without makeup, but I'm really surprised how fashionable false eyelashes are these days, and eyelash extenders. Have you noticed? I mean, they look fake. They're intended to look fake. They're not even trying to make them blend in anymore. They're just fake. Like, why do you do that? Okay, attraction, probably, wanting to look like. So again, the motivation. What are we looking for? Are we looking for approval? Reputation, something along those lines. Whose approval are we seeking? And whose judgments and opinions are we most afraid of? Those are helpful questions. Do we think people will like us more if we look a certain way? Wow, isn't that interesting? Instead of really judging us on our inner qualities, we're really letting people judge us on our external qualities, probably because we're judging ourselves on our external qualities, not our internal qualities. So once we get clear about that, assessing our own value and self-worth from a valid basis of good qualities, probably we will care a lot less about what's happening around us.
I know personally that. Give her a microphone. Hold on, Jim. I know personally that if I look nice, I'm going to be treated better. And that's from doctors to clerks. And as being an elder person, after a while you get a little tired of being discounted, which happens quite regularly. And I was going to say during COVID, I felt my generation had been kicked out to the dogs. Because everybody was not going to be vaccinated and they didn't care and blah, blah, blah. But it does make a difference how you're treated, even in Podunk, North Idaho.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. Yeah, there are societal norms that no matter how much we change our own opinions, we can't change the opinions of everybody else. But again, the more comfort we have within ourselves, the more we kind of radiate that and draw that out of others. Let me try it.
Yeah, mine usually is kind of a sense of passivity, so it doesn't work too well.
Yeah, okay. All right, there are many things, many more things we could have looked at, like our weight. How many of you, doesn't matter. How often do you weigh yourself? You don't have to raise your hand. Once a week? Once a month? Never? Once a day? At the doctor's? Yeah. My grandpa was my first dieting mentor. He was not that big, not that tall, but he was big and barrel-chested. And he'd decide he needed to go on a diet, and he'd sit down and eat a whole pound of cottage cheese because it was low-cal. Yeah. Those were the early days of dieting. And I came from a big Austrian family. Food was really important. Family holidays were all about competing with each other to see who could make the best food. And it was just a huge spread. It was obscene. And I think I was 13 or 14 before I realized I don't have to stuff myself at a family gathering. Yeah, it was a real eye-opener. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot more we could say. Let me just skip down here to what I wanted to finish with. So what's the purpose for identifying the attachment we have to our body and its comfort? It's because attachment is an affliction and leads to suffering in the short and long term. That's the bottom line. There's a quote that I find really powerful. The only time we suffer is when we're out of touch with reality. Guess what? When attachment's in our mind, we are out of touch with reality. Because when we're out of touch with reality, we're arguing with what is. And so attachment, with attachment, it's like we're arguing with how things actually are. We're trying to impose, our projection onto how something is. So as I was saying a little bit earlier, it's so powerful to recognize that we can take back the responsibility for evaluating ourselves, relying on our own mind, and really asking, who is it that I want to be? What kind of characteristics do I want to have and embody and bring to the world? What do I want to cultivate? What are the values and the principles I want to live by? And so then when we act in accord with those positive values, those ethical values, then we treat ourselves and others with kindness and respect. And that just comes along part and parcel. And so then we feel good about ourselves. No matter what our hair looks like, we feel good about ourselves. When we're kind, honest, trustworthy, fair, compassionate, we do feel good about ourselves. We feel satisfied, right? And we feel more connected to others when we have those positive states of mind going. And in contrast, when we haven't acted with kindness or honesty, integrity, all those good qualities, then if we check up, there's a sense of unease in us, that we don't feel so good about ourselves. We don't sleep so well. It impacts how we think about ourselves. And then we radiate that as well. So everything about this body is changing and impermanent. Probably we don't look in the mirror and say, oh, there's a nice looking set of constantly changing aggregates. But that's more the reality. This body, this form aggregate is constantly changing. The more we recognize that, that brings a real wisdom to how we relate to it. Our body is impermanent. When we understand that, we'll have a different relationship with it. We'll see it more realistically. We'll have less unrealistic expectations. The average American woman lives to be 79.1 now years, 79.1 years. It's dropped since COVID. And for men, it's 73.1 as of 2021. So I don't know what it is now, but that's the information I could find. Our subtle mind, however, has been with us beginninglessly and will be with us endlessly, carrying all those karmic seeds. And that's what determines our experiences. So if we're going to take care of anything, we really want to take care of our minds. And so as we understand that, then our priorities change. And this comes through very clearly when we do spend time with the death meditation, really thinking about our body as more like a temporary guest house or like a hotel. You know, when you go to a hotel room, you don't start thinking about changing the wallpaper because you know you're going to be there for a short period of time, right? You don't rearrange the furniture. Well, maybe you do. Some people do. But, you know, you're realistic about the kind of changes you're going to make to a hotel room because you know you're not going to be there very long. We're here for 100 years at the most. I mean, maybe there's the rare individual who lives a bit longer, but we're not here that long. And so, and you know, a number of the people in this room are past the halfway point or mark. So, you know, that really gets your attention. And then the younger ones, we don't know. We really don't know how long we're here. So that's there's something to meditate on here. If we're here for a short time, what's the best way to treat this body, to use this body, make use of this body? Yeah. So I'd like to end with just a very short exercise that brings this point home. When I've done this before, it's been during death meditation retreats, and so it may not land quite as well, but we'll see. So I'm just going to grab this little flower up here. Will anyone be offended if I just take one off? Okay. So just look at this fragile little flower. It's not opened yet, but how long do you think it's going to last? Just look at this little flower, or you can imagine it in your mind if you can't see it so clearly from the back of the room. Or you can imagine holding it in your hand and looking at it. Either way, notice your thoughts as I say a few sentences. You are so beautiful. You are so precious. I want you to last forever. I don't want you to change at all. I don't want you to decay or get old. I want to hold on to you forever. I don't want to ever lose you. I want you always to be right here just as you are right now. Pretty silly, huh? It's just a flower. Flowers last what? Especially when they're plucked out of their water. A day, a couple of days, depends on the fragility of the flower. Okay, now take your left hand and hold it tenderly in your right hand. Really bring your attention inside and notice your thoughts as I say a few sentences. You are so beautiful. You are so precious. I want you to last forever. I don't want you to change. I don't want you to decay or get old. I want to hold on to you forever just as you are right now. I don't ever want to lose you. I want you always to be right here, just as you are right now. What did you notice? Did it feel as silly? It didn't land? Did it? Use the microphone.
feels tragic.
Can you say more?
Well, it's just so obviously impossible. It's just not going to happen. So it's kind of sad to even talk that way and put energy into that.
Yeah. And yet we do, don't we? We just saw that with our hair and our skin and our makeup. Yeah. Kathy, you had something?
Actually, it brought tears to my eyes. You know, I could feel my eyes filling up with tears, and I felt great thankfulness for my hand, for just getting me this far in life. And, you know, I've broken a few fingers, and they've been repaired, and I can use them again. But there was this finality. It's just like it was the beginning of saying goodbye to my hand. It felt a little bit like that for a minute. Yeah, a little sad.
Anything else? Yeah.
For me, the mind of discontent of, actually, I really want to trim my nails. My fingernails are getting too long. I don't want it to stay this way forever.
So when we looked at the definition of attachment, you know, it was saying based on distorted attention that exaggerates the attractiveness of a polluted object. And one of the strongest exaggerations is of seeing things as permanent, things that are impermanent as permanent. If someone asks you, is your body permanent? Of course you'd say no. But notice how innately we grasp at ourselves as permanent, like we're going to be here forever, even though we intellectually know that's not the case. So meditating on impermanence is a very powerful antidote to not only, you know, the impermanence of the body, but the impermanence of any of the objects that we find we have attachment for. So I believe tonight there will be some meditations along those lines. And so I hope they're helpful. Any last comments or questions before we dedicate? Yes.
With that exercise, I was thinking, well, this is so obviously counter to reality. And then it made me reflect that how I think, which is more along the lines of, I wish it were different, I wish I were like someone else, is equally totally opposite to reality, you know, and tragic, as Cappy said, you know, and there was sort of this recognition, wow, I'm deluding myself, you know, that these thoughts are so opposite to how things exist. And yet
Wonderful.
I'm
Thanks
clinging,
for making that connection.
I'm clinging to them.
Yeah. Microphone up here, please.
I think it was a little bit of an improvement as I was doing that. It was coming to some deep understanding that this is just one of the many, many bodies that I've had. And that there is this, I mean, it was just this very common, grounded, the reality that this is just another one of the forms that I've taken since beginningless time. This one will be lost, and I'll get another one. Like, and that there's a nostalgia around this one that is going to get lost when I get a next one. So it was almost like the inevitability in my stage of my practice life that this is something I'm going to experience for a while. But I also had Kathy's understand that this has helped me to progress, helped me to practice, helped me to contribute to the well-being of others. And that, so I had that a little bit of appreciation in the tenuous relationship I have with this body. But it's not the first, nor will it be the last one that I'm going to have.
Yeah, and that's, I'm assuming that's the result of a lot of practice on impermanence and death and the reality of the physical body. so we can see it more realistically. One of the benefits of that is that, at the time of death, we approach it with a calm mind, with a peaceful mind, rather than the clinging and the upsetness that a lot of people find at the end of their life. Okay, anything else? Yes.
I was watching this one interview. It was like a series some news thing did on people like death in general, and they interviewed this man who had a year to live. And I don't know how far into the year or not he was, but she asked him how do you feel? He was like, oh, I feel like I'm living in Technicolor. And it would be sad to have such a short life sentence and only feel that way with a year to go. So that's why it seems like meditating on impermanence and death is important now before we're faced with actual imminent death.
You've hit on one of the purposes of that meditation, which is to bring that awareness in Technicolor now, so that we make those choices now, no matter what our age, what our situation.
There's a huge amount of information out there now about, the whole manifesting, new age. Seems so contrary, almost like, oh, don't put it out in the universe that, you might die. Don't put it out there that you might get, it's really incredible. I took a friend to look at a tiny home. She's 81. It had stairs. It wasn't wide enough for a walker. That's how I think. Okay, maybe because I've been sick, yes. And I mentioned it, and she was so upset when I started saying I did the what ifs. What if you were to break a leg? But I was thinking, hey, if you do this and you can't walk up those stairs, you have half a house, and you're already complaining about not much space. But in her mind, if she put it out there in the universe, it would somehow create it. So it's really quite contrary to what we're talking about here, in the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah. The only time we suffer is when we're out of touch with reality. So a lot of these, check for yourself. We have to check for ourselves. Are these realistic ways of thinking? What is more realistic, that we're going to draw something negative to ourselves just by thinking it? We have to think about karma very clearly in this example. On one hand, yes, we are creating our reality with our thoughts, but in a very different way. We're talking about positive states of mind, positive actions create positive results. Negative states of mind lead to negative actions, and those actions lead to negative results. We're not just talking about thinking something and it's going to bring some result that hasn't, there hasn't been a cause created other than a thought. And at our stage, our thoughts aren't that powerful. But it's interesting to just be aware of that. Okay, so let's rejoice that we had a little bit more time this afternoon to investigate some of our attachments. Thank you for your willingness to look at your own attachment to your own bodies. And let's now dedicate all that merit to whatever is your highest spiritual goal, whatever that may be.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.